Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. We're joined now by my good friend, and man, we've been friends for a long time, the great Mike Griffith of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He covers the Dogs, the Georgia Bulldogs. Nobody does it better. In fact, I'm going to tell you how close we are. Mike had been down there covering Georgia for maybe 6 weeks, and he called me one day because we talk on a regular basis. He said, Hondo, I'm telling you, these guys are coming. Kirby's building something here. It's going to last a long time. He's building something. He's building what he saw in Alabama. And I said, come on, Mike, really? And man, you nailed it, Griff. That is what Kirby's done. And the Raiders go out fifth round and get a safety that they targeted. They wanted him. They were surprised that he got to where he got, but they wanted him. And that is Christopher Smith from Georgia, the safety. Man, reminds a lot of people down here of Duron Harmon. But please, you know him well. Give us your insight, my friend.
Yeah, Chris Smith is he's an amazing player. And I like the story of Chris Smith as far as the development, and when he finally had his opportunity a few years ago in 2020, when the guy ahead of him, Richard LeCounte, who's now with the LA Rams, was involved in a shocking motorcycle season-ending injury that really hurt Richard. And he was an All-American. He was a team leader. Georgia was actually probably cruising to a national title in 2020 before Richard's accident, and then Jordan Davis got injured earlier that day. A sidebar. But Chris was pressed into action, and I don't think he was physically ready yet. I mean, he came in and he knew his assignments, but, he just wasn't where he needed to be. The next year, he came back bigger, stronger, better, and just in time, Hondo, because I'll make this statement, and I don't believe Georgia wins the 2021 national championship without Chris Smith, and I don't believe they win the 2022 championship if they don't win the 2021 championship. So I look at Chris Smith as really the kind of the turnkey guy, that pivotal player that made the difference, that launched Georgia to their back-to-back championships, because it was Chris Smith that had the pick six return against Clemson in the 2021 season opener, 10-3 win. It was the only touchdown in the game. If Chris doesn't make that play, I don't think Georgia wins that football game. I certainly don't know it for a fact, but it builds so much momentum, and he played so well. Not only that, he was a team leader. Georgia's secondary has had a lot of turnover. It's not easy to play for Kirby Smart. It's a lot like Nick Saban, kind of a hard guy to work for. Well, Kirby is a hard guy to play for. He picks these guys apart every day. And if you've made it through 4 or 5 years of Kirby Smart in the secondary, you can be coached up by anyone because he's tough. But Kirby not only tolerates, he loved Chris Smith. And Chris got bigger and better with each week. And doggone it, Hondo, if he didn't do it again this year. A lot of people looked at Georgia's 50-30 win over LSU. So that was a blowout win. Not really. LSU had 149 yards in the first quarter of that game, and they were actually driving early, and there was a blocked field goal. And Chris Smith alertly waited until the ball's kind of spinning down there at the 3 or 4 yard line, and everybody's just kind of like, dead ball. He waits until he sees a few of these LSU guys turn to the bench, and then he scoops it up and takes it. Just one of those heads-up plays. Guy is always in the right place at the right time. Still a little undersized at 5'11", 192. I know his 40 time wasn't good at 4.62, but when you've got a guy that can anticipate the play, I don't need to tell you this. You cover the NFL now. So much of this is right place, right time. And so much of that is, I don't want to call it intuitiveness, but film study leads to that. And that's what you're going to get with Chris. Another thing, even though he's 192, he will absolutely throw himself into the ball carrier. I mean, you watch this guy, it's a train wreck when he comes up and run support. So I'm sure the Raiders have a training staff that will continue to get Chris bigger, better, stronger. And this guy does not lack for work ethic.
Mike, I want to ask you 3 areas about the kid that I've heard nothing but rave, because you know him personally. You're there covering him every day of his college career. I've heard that this kid, you will never find another player with a higher football IQ. That he is. Matter of fact, one person used the word to me, his kid is brilliant on the football field. You could tell he puts the time into watching film, that his mind is second to none. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, one of the keys when you're Georgia to winning games in the SEC is preventing big plays. Well, preventing big plays is just playing assignment sound football, right? Coaches always draw it up where there's somebody where they're supposed to be, but a lot of times if a guy doesn't make the proper read or doesn't, make the proper key or doesn't line up in the proper position, that's what kind of opens defenses up for big plays. And I would challenge you or anybody else watching to think to yourself, when's the last time you saw Georgia with a blown assignment that led to a touchdown? That was because Chris Smith was always there. He was always that stopgap. He's going to be one of the hardest. Now, listen, make no mistake about it. Jalen Carter is going to be one of the hardest players to replace in college football because he's an absolute train wrecker, as Kirby calls him. But Chris Smith is going to be just as hard to replace because of what he did for the back end of the defense. And that was assignment sound. And assignment sound is film study. And to your point, high football IQ, being able to make everybody else right, as Kirby says, recognizing that something's not quite right out there and being able to make those calls from the secondary, talk to those young players that have been on the perimeter next to him the last couple of years and make sure that everyone is right. And I just, that's kind of one of those qualities that doesn't show up at the NFL Combine. I know they do their IQ test, but in terms of those intangibles, having a guy like Chris Smith that can make everyone right, and a guy that's willing to play on every specialty. That's another thing about Georgia players. These guys play special teams. That's not considered something they look down their nose at. That's, if you're a great player and you get chosen for a special teams unit, that means something to them.
Second thing I've heard about him, Mike, and you touched on it briefly, but I want to get in more, is that this guy's a freak. He's going to be in the weight room. He looks like he's chiseled out of concrete. He is very disciplined because he knows he's undersized in the weight room and disciplined in the cafeteria. Will you talk about that side of him, please?
Yeah, well, he's learned how to take care of his body. Georgia's been, the last couple of years they've had this $2 million football building with this cafeteria in it, and all their food orders are custom made and with a nutritionist. I mean, it really is a football factory in that sense. And Chris is a guy that was all in. And when you see how little that he came from in Atlanta, this is a guy who recognizes the opportunity. And to your point, as I said, when Richard LeCounte went down in 2020 and Chris Smith was pressed into action, this was a guy that needed to get bigger, stronger, faster. And he went all in. He had an opportunity that arose sooner than he thought. He probably didn't think he was going to have the opportunity until the next year, but all of a sudden, and he's just jumped in with both feet. His nickname is Soldier Chris, Soldier, Soulja. You can see that on Instagram. And I kind of like it because I think it fits Chris. He goes about his work like a soldier, serves his team.
Lastly, I want to talk to you about him, the teammate. I'm going to give you two examples that I've heard about. One, somebody at Ohio State was telling me that when they played in the college football playoffs, and it looked like Ohio State was going to win the game, that he was screaming to defensive linemen and guys that necessarily would not be in his purview what was coming, where it was coming. And they talk about him as a teammate. He's the kind of guy that would go over when Kirby was tough, put his arm around a kid and tell him it's going to be all right. Understand his bark's not his bite. And that they talked about off football, meaning obviously the plays against Ohio State are on the field, but his football mentality to make everyone better. Irvin Johnson once told me, you can't be a great player if you don't make everybody around you better. You can just be a good player. Those intangibles, how he leads guys. One person said to me, it's phenomenal to see. Did you see that?
Yeah. And Kirby talked about it. Chris is a competitor. He'll fight you if you blow your. He's that guy in the huddle, that's going to make, like I said, that's going to make everyone right, not just with the calls like you were just talking about against Ohio State, but with the challenges, right? And whatever it takes. If it's a young player that needs the encouragement, if it's somebody else that should have known their assignment, he's extremely competitive. He wants to win at everything, and yet it's not overbearing. You don't see anything too demonstrative. It's not like there's going to be a camera on him on the sideline. It's a tone of voice. It's something that he's earned through his hard work in the weight room. But again, the first 2.5 years I was here, he was relatively anonymous. He was just a name on the depth chart. And then suddenly when he was pressed into action, he said, oh, there's a little bit of a drop off from Richard LeCounte to him. But I'm telling you, Hondo, by the time the next season started, Soldier Chris went to work and he went to war against Clemson. you played that pick six. I mean, I hope you have the opportunity to play that play, for the Raider fans. And I mean, it was one of those games where somebody had to blink first. The defenses were outstanding. A lot of people don't remember, but Clemson actually had the second best defense in the nation. That was the number one and number two defenses in the nation facing off in the first game of the season in Charlotte. And it was fantastic. And it was Chris that really made the game-breaking play that I thought launched the season. And if they don't win that game, they don't get a second chance at Alabama. If you'll remember, if we fast forward to the SEC title game, Bryce Young in Alabama, for those that doubt Bryce Young, he put 41 up on the best defense of the modern era. Georgia only allowed 6.9 points per game in that regular season, which was the fewest since 1986 Oklahoma. Bryce Young was spectacular. But because Georgia was undefeated, they still made the playoff. And then, of course, they plowed through yet another overrated Michigan outcoached team, which is just miraculous that somehow Jim Harbaugh once coached a Super Bowl. I'm like, really, that's not a joke. That did happen. And they just destroyed the Michigan team in the playoff. And then the second chance against Alabama, they shut out Bryce Young and kept him out of the end zone for 3 quarters. So, and Chris Smith was a big reason why they were able to make some modifications. But if they don't beat Clemson, they don't get the second chance. And without Chris Smith, they don't win that championship. So I think he's a gem. I think he's a fantastic player. I think he's going to do tremendous things, and he's a character guy. He plays with enough of an edge that he fits the Raiders in that sense. But off the field, this is a guy that, there was nothing. I mean, this guy is where he's supposed to be all the time. Very responsible kid. Comes from, Atlanta. So he has had things around him before that he's had to be disciplined and grow through. So I think he's a fantastic draft pick. I'm excited for the Raiders.
Mike, we've been friends a long time, and every time I talk to you, I love the anecdotes, but there's a lot of young people watching our podcast or listening who are going to be like, wait a minute, did that old man just say Oklahoma played defense?
Yeah, right? Yeah, 1986 Oklahoma. I know, it's hard to believe, some throwback. Yeah. And, the Harbaugh, I don't know what to say about it. I'm sure you've talked about Jim Harbaugh before. I thought a fantastic, ingenious, maybe just thinks too hard. But yeah, these Michigan teams have been, you look at them, they're loaded, they're talented. I mean, if not this year, Hondo win. I mean, my goodness, I thought this for sure was the year. I guess we'll find out next year. I mean, that's the great thing about college football. These teams carry over, and not quite the parity that we see maybe in the NFL. It seems like there's maybe 6 or 7 teams that can win a title in college football. In the NFL, we've seen teams make great games over the years, and certainly, Las Vegas with that incredible stadium and the franchise. It's like I said, you got a great beat out there. You got a great product. As a former Denver Broncos fan, I say that with the utmost respect because they made me cry on a lot of Sundays when I was a little kid growing up.
Well, Griff, you are so good at what you do. First of all, I respect you as a man, and I'm so glad I get to call you Grandpa. Welcome to the club. But
Yeah.
I appreciate you. I love you, and great coverage of the Dogs. Nobody does it better, and I love it. Thanks for joining us early in the morning.
Yeah, and you can check me out, by the way, on the dognation.com website. We're an entity of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and I am at Mike Griffith 32 on Twitter. So thank you so much, Hondo.
A regular on the Paul Feinbaum Show.
We do a weekly deal during the season on the SEC network. It's pretty cool. It's fun. I never know what he's going to throw at me, but right, that's what makes it. Just like you, I knew we were going to talk Chris Smith, but I didn't know what angles we were going to come with. But again, it's so easy to talk about Christopher Smith, and whether you go with Christopher or Chris, you'll have to ask him when he gets out there. But he is Soldier Chris. I know he likes that moniker, so hopefully the Raider fans will catch on to that quickly.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks, Hondo.
This is Hondo Carpenter with the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation and part of the Fans First Sports Network. Make sure you click the join button. We'll see you later.